You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 430.
Hello and welcome back once again to the Outdoor Station, the day after the visit of Storm Auntie Doris. We're located in the middle of the UK, and on the news this morning there are apparently 1,000 homes in our area without power and about 250,000 reports of damage and trees down. But I know we've been fairly lucky, and the north of England and Scotland has suffered a lot more. In fact, I've got a few of my own trees currently propped up with pallets and old fence posts in the hope that the roots will still keep hold. But on to today's podcast, which is with a guest you will have heard from before. In podcast number 399, 400 and 401, I spoke with Aleks Kashefi at the beginning, the middle and the end of his Land's End to John O'Groats run, which he was doing barefoot. 1,000 miles in 38 days, and it's well worth a listen, certainly to get a feel for the mettle of the man. Aleks has just returned from another equally ambitious, or mad, adventure which started in August 2016 and finished February 2017, running the length of Europe. This is part one of a two-part podcast, which is slightly longer than normal, but basically because it's full of good stuff. Now, what I love about talking to Aleks and those like him is the factual way of looking at these adventures without turning everything into an overhyped social media drama. As you'll hear, he just makes a decision and gets on with it. Before we hear from him, though, I just wanted to give a quick thank you to Rucksack Rose for her ongoing support, and to remind all of you, if you haven't done so already, to join in the fun at the Outdoor Station website and add your details to our newsletter page. Of course, links to Aleks and his photos and blogs are all on the Outdoor Station website, and I can thoroughly recommend that you give his blog a read, which is a really good, down-to-earth record of his adventure.
I've just got back from Punta de Tarifa, which is the most southerly point of Europe. It's about 6 miles away from the African continent. It's a place where you've got the Mediterranean clashing into the Atlantic. It's a crazy place as a plot of land because it was used for military use. It was used just as a lighthouse. More recently, it's been used to shelter or house illegal African migrants that end up being washed up on the shores and have nowhere to go. They were actually, and I think they still are in summer, they're kept there before they're shipped out elsewhere. I think it was just utterly crazy, considering I started at Noordkap, which is a very northern point of Europe, and that was more like a Land's End or John O'Groats place. It had a hotel, there was a cafe, there was some attraction things to see, and like a monument at the end, and you stared out, and the only thing ahead of you was ocean and the Arctic.
So you've just traversed north to south across Europe.
Yep, yeah, top to bottom.
And I presume in your usual style, you did this barefoot?
I did it with sandals on, so it's not barefoot.
You're softening up in your old age.
Yeah, I think I must be.
Aleks, it's good to speak to you again and hear your voice and humour. We have got so much to talk about on this particular trip that what I'd like to do really is pick up from our last conversation, which is when you did the Land's End to John O'Groats barefoot, and you sort of indicated you might do something else after that, but you hadn't really thought about it. So, and I think that was probably, 12 months before you started this one?
Just about, yeah. I think 12 months and a week. This time I decided I'd have 5 days to kind of do stuff I wanted to do before I went. Not that it made any difference, mind, but.
So tell me about your mindset then. What did this come to mind as you did your Land's End, or how did this all come about? What's changed in your life that brought this epic 5,000 kilometre, isn't it? 5,000 kilometre adventure.
6,189. I got told.
Good grief.
Well, it's a bit strange because when I got to the end of Land's End, John O'Groats, it did feel like, well, that's done. Now what? So I hadn't actually even thought about what am I going to do next, what am I going to do with this adventure that I've just had, and so it was kind of people asking, what are you going to do next? And I was thinking, I could run the Wainwright Fells. I'd like to do a Bob Graham round, maybe do a coast to coast or something like that. So lots of ideas, but none of them really kind of stuck. They're there, but they didn't really take hold. And then guy called Neil Bryant, who runs a website and a Facebook group called Ultra Running Community, he pinged me an image and said, "Why don't you do this?" And it was an image of the E1 trail, or the proposed E1 trail, which goes from Nordkapp and it went to Palamo. And I looked at it and thought, well, actually, that's kind of makes sense. I've done a country, so doing another country is just doing a country. It's the same concept, just repeated. So I started looking at different continents. At one point, I wanted to run North America and then South America as well, but someone advised me not to do it. And I looked at it and thought, that's going to take forever. That's not just that's not just even a year. That's probably 2 or 3 years of running. Then I kind of put it aside. Weirdly, Discovery Channel picked up one of my tweets about it and said, "We've entered you into a competition." I didn't realize there was a competition. And there was like a voting process to win $5,000. But as soon as they picked it up, followed by someone else sharing an article with me that mentioned the E1, me finding a different article about long distance hiking trails, which also had this E1 thing, I decided actually running Europe from north to south is what I'm going to do. And then it just sort of planning kicked off, training kicked off, and kind of getting the word out, trying to fund it really. Sort of it all, basically everything went into, I'm going to run Europe north to south. I'm going to follow this trail. It didn't actually end in Palamo. It ended in Saracusa. So the actual information that was online wasn't correct. It turned out later that the information I got from the European Long Distance Trail Association, I think they're called, the information they gave me there wasn't 100% true. Yeah, the trail isn't actually finished being marked or fully decided on the actual route when you hit Sicily, which isn't particularly useful if you're trying to do something no one's done before when you don't actually know the route. So yeah, there was a lot that happened.
Wow.
I think loads of stuff that happened, and then obviously I started, and now I'm sort of sat here.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about a couple of things. First of all,
Yep.
I did some research on your blog. Well, blogs, you've got 2, hadn't you? So blogs today, obviously in preparation for this. And Did I read somewhere that you only really started running about 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, when I started this, I'd have been running for 4 years and less than a week. So yeah, I only started running. It'll be 4.5 years ago now. And
so we're talking running from the couch potato type running, are we, or had you always been running?
No, couch the 5K app. Struggled through the first 2-3 weeks of 30 seconds of jogging, like really slow jogging, and then being doubled up and thinking, oh my God, I think I might die if I have to do another 8 of these, because that's all it was. And then you walked for, I think it was 2 minutes of walking, 30 seconds running and repeat. That kind of escalated, admittedly. It sort of went, well, the program for a 10K is the same. It's just longer. Might as well do 10K one. Half marathon. It's the same. It's just more weeks. I might as well move on to that. And then it was, well, marathon's the same. It's just a bit longer. I'd like to see if I can run a marathon. I didn't actually know ultra marathons existed at that point until someone mentioned one. I was just like, you're crazy. That's insane. And then a guy called Captain, he's not called Captain Morehouse, he's called Simon Morehouse, but I call him Captain Morehouse. He runs with Buxton Running Club, and I was running with them, and he described this 50-miler called Dusk Till Dawn Ultra around the Peak District. And I was sold. He basically described it as a long distance jolly out where you meet lots of nice people and there's food every so many miles, and there's even a barbecue at mile 38 or 40, and you get to have burgers and bacon, and he really sort of made it sound amazing. And at that point I thought, it's interesting, only to have a friend say, oh, but your knees will go. And at that point it was like, no, they won't. Surely they can't go, otherwise people wouldn't do it. So it was like a mission to see if I can do it. And then the next step came on. Can I do that? Can I do this barefoot? Which is where Land's End John O'Groats came from. It was just sort of, it's just kind of kept going, really.
Well, I suppose it's true, the old saying, then running can be dangerous. If you start 3 or 4 years ago and you end up now doing ultra marathons virtually barefoot, it's obviously not good for the mental health, is it?
Nope. I'm seriously scarred.
Tell me, so at the end of Land's End, you were teaching, I believe. So did this sort of preparation that you were doing for this particular trip with the planning and the physical side, it's almost the planning really is actually probably the hardest part, I would guess. What sort of sacrifices have you made in your lifestyle to enable yourself to have the time to work at it?
I'd already got rid of TV and internet in the flat that I lived in. Then I decided that actually, if I'm training and going to different places, I'm not spending any time in the flat, or all I'm doing is sleeping there. So I could just sleep in my car. I had a Renault Estate, I think it was a Megane. So I boarded up the back, put a bed one side, got rid of loads and loads of my stuff that I just decided I didn't need. Reduced it all down to three boxes that I could actually keep in the back with me. And I spent about a month or so living in the back of a Renault Megane, driving to the Lake District, driving down south, just basically driving everywhere just to train. My thought process was that running that for that distance, for that length of that period of time, because I worked out it would take me about 6 or 7 months. That period of time and doing it while wild camping is not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to have the stuff that I would if I was living in a flat. So I need to get my level of comfort slightly lower. I'm really glad that I did, admittedly, and it was crazy. At some point I'd wake up, everything inside was frozen. You'd wake up with ice in your beard. I had the police knocking on my window on one night. They were just checking to make sure I was okay, but I panicked and in my underpants dived into the driving seat, drove into Ilkley where I was near, and then because I'd spilt my drink, ended up having to get on all fours to try and dry it all while some guy walked past. So there's me, my underpants, with my ass facing the front of the car. And this guy just walked past with his dog. I saw him just at the corner of my eye and just went, oh, for God's sake. But all credit to the guy. He didn't even blink. He just carried on walking.
It was Ilkley, yeah. Well, he's probably seen it all before.
Probably. And then the next day it was just training again. That's basically kind of what I did. The car cost too much to get it MOT'd, so I was lucky and I found a local Buxton taxi firm who was getting rid of one of their old taxis, basically a van with loads of chairs in, one of the airporters that they have. So I got that off him, really cheap, and built a bed in the back with some storage, put some shelving unit up so I could have somewhere for cooking stuff. And while I was working full time, I was basically finishing work, doing all the stuff I needed to do while I was at work, leaving work, getting in the van, driving out into the middle of nowhere in the Peak, doing a bit of training, and then testing kit, things like sleeping bags, etc. While I was in the van. And then the next morning, wake up at 4:00 after having stayed up late on purpose, just to reduce the amount of sleep you get, so you get used to being tired, and then going to work and doing a full day's work and then repeating. it was quite intense. I can't believe I managed to basically pull off a year of teaching like that, or from January to July, so 6-7 months of teaching like that, especially when people said it's not going to be possible. It's a bit crazy.
Well, it is when you hear it in the cold light of day like that. It's phenomenal. And you're a secondary school. You were a secondary school teacher. So your job came to the end, I presume, at the end of the spring term. Is it June, July?
It was July. I basically, because I've had GCSE groups, it just didn't seem right to ditch the students partway through, especially when especially in spring, they'd be last minute preparation for GCSE exams. So I decided to see it all the way through to the end of the year. It kind of made sense for my tutor group that I had that I left at that point, because I kind of noticed that the students would respond differently because I'd done Land's End to John O'Groats. So if I asked them to try something, whether it was something, outside lesson, sporty type thing, taking part in competitions in school, things like that, they seem more likely to actually have a go. So,
that's interesting.
So, and I think it was because of that. In one lesson, as an example, I put something down that was quite challenging, and I heard one of the kids turn around to his mates and say, there's no point in saying I can't do it to this guy, or the word effort. He just left it at that, and I'm just going to have a go. And it's sort of, that was like a light going on. Like, okay, hold on. This has got nothing to do with me being a teacher suddenly. They're looking at other stuff.
And they're seeing beyond that, yeah.
They're seeing, it's not just a teacher in front of me. Oh, okay, I can't really say the word effort in a annoyed fashion to this guy, because I think he understands effort on a different level.
Mm. Oh, that's nice that age range, you obviously gained lots of respect in their eyes as a result of the first trip.
Yeah, and then the build-up to this, because they sort of found out that I was leaving and what I was doing, or what I was planning to do, and it was interesting seeing their thought processes from then. So there was questions like, so where are you going to sleep? What are you going to eat? What are you going to do if this happens? I mean, some of them was, what are you going to do if someone robs you and takes your passport? I don't know, really, until it happens. And that answer kind of had them looking, going, oh, okay. Oh, not really sure how to take, this guy's attitude. And it wasn't really till then that I noticed that there's a lot of worrying being done about stuff that hasn't happened yet.
Well, actually, that leads me into something I was going to talk to you about a bit later on in the conversation, which I will keep for later on in the conversation, because I think it's a really interesting point and observation you make in your blog that I was reading this morning. So you finished school then July time. You went over. Was it August you started this, or was it October you started?
Flew out August 1st and arrived at Nordkap late on the 2nd of August, and then started the next day.
Because the one thing that immediately comes to mind, which I'm sure must have been mentioned to you in its various forms, is obviously if you're aiming to do this trip from August there, you're going through Europe and through some pretty rough terrain in Europe as regards the actual countries themselves, notoriously with cold winters, and going through in a winter must be doubling up the difficulty of the challenge.
Yeah. I kind of didn't want to leave it. Once I finished, I just wanted to go, right, finished, get on straight away. So you can basically get back. And one of the plans was to get back just around the time, because it worked out, it would be just around the time the kids would be starting to do the final prep for their exams. So if I could finish, that's kind of like a bit of motivation for them. Well, he can do that, we can do this sort of thing, and obviously go back and talk to them about the whole experience and whatnot. But when I did my research on the weather, because I actually looked at weather patterns over the last 5 or 6 years and weather data for each one of the countries I was passing through. Admittedly, I didn't look at France or Spain. I looked a bit at Spain, the southern part, but it's so south, I just assumed it's going to be warm and beautiful weather. And in general, it's some of the driest times. If you're going to do it in summer, you've got a real tight window up in Nordkap in the Arctic Circle, which a big chunk of my run of Scandinavia was in the Arctic Circle. You've only got a tiny, tiny window where the weather's actually reasonable. So I kind of looked at it, and it was just a case of, well, just get it done. It doesn't matter it shouldn't matter what the weather's like in terms of cold, warm, because you'll manage it with your kit. But it just made it more challenging, I guess. I wouldn't change it for the world, actually. I'm glad I did it in the winter.
Well, it's certainly given you plenty to talk about. I mean, did you have a sending off party at all? Did anybody sort of wave you off and take photographs and do any video or anything like that?
I videoed some stuff myself as I was sort of driving to park my van in a friend's driveway. We went out for a couple of beers with some close friends. Nothing big or fancy. And the only people there at the airport was my mother and stepdad. And that was it. Just went.
And so, but actually, on the day you started itself, did anybody wave you off, as it were? Any connection from the running community?
No, not really. Quite a few people on Facebook were like, "Good luck," etc. So there was quite a lot of social media support.
So how were you feeling then on that day? Were you? I mean, I've read your blog, but you tell me, what in your own words, how did you actually feel when you were about to set off? Was it like, hurrah, right, here we go, I've done all the preparation, this is going to be fun, let's crack on with it? Or hang on a second, am I actually a bit bloody mad here?
I was really frightened. I was petrified. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was really focused on getting there, getting started. So, I wasn't thinking about anything other than, right, get there, get sorted. What do you need to do? So it's kind of almost like pushing everything aside in terms of family and close friends, just pushing it aside and going, right, just get on with it. You need to focus on this. If you start thinking of, let's say, home and family and friends and all that sort of thing, you're going to make it more difficult for yourself. But the main thing was fear. Like, what the hell am I doing? I've started something that I have no idea if I'm going to finish, or even if I'm going to survive. Because some of the parts, especially northern Scandinavia, some of the parts, there's nothing. And there was no one, which was even more insane. Even once I popped off and started running through Sweden along just the most populated route, there was no one for days, 3-4 days, and I'd probably get one car drive past me.
Wow. Well, you're painting a picture there. I mean, the research that you did, obviously people talking about the E1, so did that actual, I presume there's a website or something, was that actually a wealth of information, or did you really have to patch together the information from different sources, weather maps, Google Maps, whatever sources that you used?
It was lots of standalone places to research. There is a website that has all the locations that you pass through, or the names of the locations, which in Norway, it's just a random lake in the middle of nowhere, or a cabin someone's built, like a wind shelter with a door on it that someone's built and just named it, and it's in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't really have grid references. I got a young girl, which might be worth chatting to her as well, because she would have had a slightly different experience of running Scandinavia at the same time. She decided, seeing me talk, that she's going to take on running Norway. Then we had a discussion. It was like, well, you're only running part of Norway. You're not even running the full length. Why don't you do something that's the full length? So she decided she's going to run the whole of Scandinavia.
Is this Sophie?
Yeah, Sophie Rooney.
Good. Yeah.
And she... so we kind of started together. She arrived on a different plane. I arrived on a plane, went to the start, and then it was off. And it was interesting seeing her for the first 10 days, because I think it was a massive culture. I had a bit of a culture shock. or a bit of a shock in terms of what it was actually like compared to what people said it was supposed to be like in terms of the research. I think she had an even bigger shock. But yeah, it's just loads and loads of different websites, different places, looking at, like I said, the weather data. Sophie did all the looking at Google Maps and whatnot, and collating it all on a spreadsheet, marking where our food stores are going to be, where we can actually buy food, so we could work out what the gaps were, so we could work out how much food to carry. Based on that, I did some really low calorie training where I was basically running 30 miles, but I was limiting my daily calorie intake to 500 calories.
Whew.
And then repeating it the day after. So I was effectively doing two 30-mile runs with 500 calories in the middle, just to find out what it would be like. And that was interesting because I found that I could still move. I'd need to stop or slow down a little bit more, or a bit more depending on the terrain. I did need to have a bit of a nap, but it was really difficult to stay warm. Right. I would get cold even though I was wearing all the clothes I'd worn the previous day, and that was actually really it turned out that was really important information for me.
Well, I think if the one thing, I think you're about to say it. The one thing I've noticed in reading the blog was this endless cycle that you went through of sleep, run, find somewhere to eat, charge your phone, sleep, run, and sometimes reading what you were actually eating, and getting out of your body at the same time with, as you say, a long distance run to meet up with somebody, 50k. Well, it's only another 25k. It's only so and so.
Yeah,
I mean, phenomenal bit of discipline, if nothing else. Because I know what it's like. I mean, I've been hungry when I've been doing something. Nothing to this extent in the slightest. But my head is saying to myself, I've got to eat. I want to eat something. Where am I going? I'm going to eat something. I want to eat something. I want something now. But of course, if you're in the middle of Norway, you're not necessarily going to have that sort of facility. So the discipline that you both must have had as you were doing this must have been phenomenal.
Yeah, especially first 10 days. Because that I think that was the biggest shock. After that, I personally, I kind of seem to get used to it. I think you go into a stage called ketosis, where your body's just using as much of your body fat reserves as fuel as it can, and it becomes more efficient at doing it. So I actually felt okay energy level wise for most of the runs. There was a few days where I'd have real low points. And all I needed to do was stop for a while. Admittedly, I didn't really think of it like all I need to do is stop for a while. I just sort of go, right, I'm going to stop. And I drop my stuff down. I just lie down on the floor for a bit and just enjoy the scenery around me, or just the peace and quiet and that sort of thing. But it seemed that it was good because it meant later I knew what I could get out of my body. And I didn't have to worry about where am I going to find this, where am I going to find water, which in Spain, water became a big problem. I thought, once I hit Denmark, once I hit civilization, I thought water's a problem, but it really wasn't, because I was carrying about 1.5 liters of water, but then I was kind of able to run past the shop in that day and top up my water if I needed to. Whereas in Spain, you don't really always end up finding the water or the shop that's open. Like some of the shops were closed when I got there, or they weren't actually there. That was the most amusing one. Followed Google Maps to a middle of a field where there's supposed to be this big supermarket, and there was absolutely nothing there. And I had another 18 kilometers to go before I would actually get water. And the last drink I'd had was the night before. So that was an angry moment. I did swear a lot at my phone. Look, there is nothing there. I'm stood right in the right place.
Google had obviously received the planning permission, but hadn't taken it any further.
Yeah.
You're listening to The Outdoor Station. sharing the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
In these first 10 days then, the culture shock that you went through and experienced, but running on a small amount of calories, how did Sophie cope then? Because you must have noticed as an observer, and certainly the women's metabolism is different and they get colder quicker for this particular reason. So if she's running on 500 calories as well, she must have been freezing most of the time.
I think temperature-wise she was okay. Basically, the pace dropped and I dropped the distance. So instead of doing the stages as we'd planned, we were doing shorter stages. So the 10 days that we travelled, we only covered what originally we planned to do in 7 days. So I was kind of doing what you would do if you're supporting someone on a Bob Graham or a Paddy Buckley. And I did I did a few supports just before going, partly as training, just so I could get the height and the distance and everything in terms of my running. But at the same time, you kind of learn by looking at someone else doing something really hard, when they need to eat, what happens if they don't eat in terms of the way they're functioning. So that was really useful. I did pull the pace back. I pulled the distance back. If I saw that she needed to stop, I wouldn't really make a big fuss of it. It would just be, right, we're stopping here now. and you could see like thank God for that. Especially since her feet, I looked from her pictures earlier today, she had some whacking great big blisters on her feet, between her toes, on the ball of her foot, and they were nasty. The pain of walking on blisters must have been ridiculous, and that has the effect of pulling you into a headspace where you're thinking, I've got this much left, and you're constantly thinking how much you've got left. Because you're moving slowly, that distance doesn't really seem to be shrinking very quickly, and it has a massive impact on just your mentality and your ability to just move.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that one, certainly. So she was using trainers then, I guess, or trail shoes or whatever, but you were in your sandals.
I was in my sandals, yeah, which turned out to be an absolute genius manoeuvre. Bearing in mind, most of the trail we went was marsh and bogs, followed by sort of going up a mountain that was really rocky. So I didn't really have any issues with my foot, including the fact that I started with quite a bad cut to the base of my third toe. And I was actually, that was an open wound. Didn't get infected. I managed to keep it clean. I kept super gluing it back together when the glue failed. Tiny bit of covering on it, just I don't even know why I put the covering on, really. But that actually healed as I went along. That went from being open wound that would bleed to healed. So maybe I shouldn't have started with quite such a bad wound on my foot, but I mean, it's crazy what the body can do, because it didn't really give me any hassle. It didn't give me any problems.
Wow. So just give us a bit of an abbreviation of the first couple of months then, up to Christmas, where you were, what the weather conditions were like, what the terrain was like, the sort of the daily activities that you were going through, because the Scandinavian part of the trip is significantly different to the southern part, wasn't it?
It was. Things changed, mainly because the use of the land changed, I think, is the main thing. So Scandinavia, Norway, night 0, so night before we started, and a combination. I think it was just the wind was way too strong. It snapped my tent pole, snapped the middle section into 3, so I couldn't actually fix it. I tried to fix it with bracing it with a tent peg and then taping climbing tape around it. So that caused a bit of a problem. Ended up sleeping in the Nordisk Telemark 1 that Sophie had. So it was 2 of us in a one-man tent. A few days later, propping it up. So it was basically a month. The first month was me propping up my tent with just sticks that I found, and the effect that had was that the tent just got worse and worse. The fly sheet was kind of getting a bit tatty, and it was developing holes from where the stick was and where, rocks that I'd used to lift the stick up just to tension the skin a little bit.
Excuse me interrupting you, but that's the Vade Gull, isn't it? Was that the one?
Yes, the Vade Gull. Really like the tent. I've got a photo of both our tents pitched up in Norway, and I've got like a tent that's really angular when it should be a lovely curved shape, because you've got tension on that main tent pole. By the time I got to Abisko, I'd kind of in the background been trying to organise a tent, or ask a friend of mine called Louise. She basically was helping organise this tent, because you would get to civilization, you'd have internet access for the night that you're there or the moment you're passing through, but then you'd have 10 days of nothing, no signal whatsoever. Not even able to get GPS signal in some places. So navigating was done by photographing my maps and storing them on my phone, and relying on the trail being reasonably marked, which at some points it wasn't. In Abisko, I got stuck there for 14 days. And I learnt that I'm the most impatient person on the planet, and I get quite angry when I have to wait. But I ended up having to buy a tent from Nordisk, and they shipped it direct to Abisko. And then I set off. That caused a delay, which meant that the ferries were gone. There was no ferries to cross all the big lakes in Norway. If I wanted to continue on trail anyway, going around the outside, all the food cabins were shut for the next 1,000 miles. So there was no way I was going to be able to carry that much food. I think it was the right decision. There's no other decision you could have made, other than I'm going to stop, and I didn't want to stop. So I got off the trail, got into a place called Ritsum, and made my own way, and just kind of made up the route as I was going along based on where all the shops were, all the food shops were, thinking it's going to be way easier. The first shop, once I left Ritsum, was nearly 100 miles away. So then I had 3 days of food to carry, plus all the equipment I've got to try and stay warm. And I was heading south and basically racing winter, which became a really good training coach. Further north,
sorry to interrupt you again, but was there snow on the ground at this particular time?
No, there wasn't. At this particular time, autumn was just starting to settle in, and it was incredible, because the further south I'd go, at the pace I was moving south, I could see almost like the season reversing. So you had birch trees that were bright yellow leaves, all the vegetation on the ground goes an amazing red colour. And as I went further south, there was more green suddenly and less of those colours. But then winter arrived a month early. So I went from, sort of it dipping near freezing at night, being around 10, 13 degrees at its warmest during the day, to it staying below freezing for 3 or 4 days. So the route I'd picked, which was a direct southern route, had to be changed, and I headed to the coast where temperatures are warmer because of the sea. And
did people advise you to do that as you were running, as it were, the people you met, or was this a sort of a logistical decision you'd made as a just in case, as a plan B?
I didn't meet anyone really until I reached. I was quite far south, actually. I was like the sort of central part of Sweden before I actually met anyone. Near a place, just after a place called Onskoldvik on the coast. So it was only until when I reached the coast that I started seeing people. It was just something I did based on what I knew. I knew the coast is generally warmer. I'm heading to the coast, because I had a day where I couldn't get any water from anywhere because everything was absolutely rock solid. I even tried getting quite big rocks out the ground, and they'd frozen in place, so I couldn't actually get a rock out. When I did and threw it at the lake, it just bounced and just dinted some ice, but it didn't actually get through to water. It was only a really tiny, trickly roadside stream that I found that was still running that gave me water. So I'm surprised I've not had issues with my stomach from some of the water sources I used. But then followed the coast for a bit, and I had no choice to head more inland because I needed to get to the opposite coast. That's when winter properly arrived while I waited for a emergency bag to arrive, which I didn't want to leave without. I needed a replacement one. And I ended up with about a foot and a half of snow falling before I left Ulricehamn. And that was another interesting thing, because as you ran across and got nearer the coast, you could see the level of snow drop because they'd had less snow. And it went from foot and a half and sleeping in a foot of snow all the way to no snow and a frosty ground. But it became a battle to manage your kit versus make really good progress.
So now you've got snow. I'm visualising snow on the ground, and you're obviously dealing with that. But can you just tell me or tell us how you were coping as regards your sandals, regards grip, and the practicalities of running with sandals on snow? And also, did you get some sort of insulation for your feet?
I did, yeah. I had a pair of neoprene socks. Outkit do some like tabby neoprene wetsuit socks. So you've got a section for your big toe and then one for your smaller toes. And I'd spotted those when I visited them before I left and said, I'm going to need some of those, sending to middle of Sweden for when the weather hits real cold, and can I take a pair with me? Luckily, I got in touch with them early and got them to send it to Abisko, which is real far north. It's still in the Arctic Circle. So I had always had those. I had a pair of more windproof ones to put on the outside. On the really cold days, I had to wear both, especially when it was windy. I had to wear both the neoprene plus the windproof. So effectively, I was making a modular shoe when I needed to. In terms of grip and stuff, I didn't really have issues with grip. Didn't really have issues with my feet in general. I think that was down to just knowing how to manage them from running Land's End to John O'Groats and running Edel Skyline in winter with no shoes on. And I did some winter training in snow and had a go at a winter Bob Graham round in my sandals. So I'd done quite a bit of self-experimentation so that I could manage my feet, and obviously kit as well. It ended up being a case of I needed to manage moisture more than I need to manage anything else, because if my kit was even remotely damp, I would have a really cold night's sleep to the point that you wake up shivering. If I managed managed to get the moisture issue sorted, then I had a night where I'd probably wake up 2 or 3 times from being slightly cold, but then I could keep myself warm. And that was another thing with the eating. If I didn't eat enough, I knew I was going to have a cold night. So it was insane. The Scandinavia section was a baptism of fire, I think. Waking up in the morning, tent completely frozen solid. You've got ice on the outside of your sleeping bag, and if you don't get the ice off the sleeping bag or have a fire at some place, your sleeping bag is going to be next to useless because it's a down bag. So it was, it taught me a lot of things, really. Messing around with vapor barrier layers like bin bags or plastic bags on my hands, where I couldn't find bin bags for most of Sweden, which was interesting. I put on my waterproofs, so I was sleeping with some thermal merino layers plus waterproofs over the top, just to reduce the amount of moisture that escaped from my body, because I knew that was my problem.
Didn't the inside of the clothing get wet then?
A little. I mean, you'd wake up damp and you'd dry off by moving and using your body heat to dry your clothes, which I seem to have to do for the entire run, really, including in Spain. But then I've got over the whole Sweden thing, and I'm on Denmark. Denmark's having one of the coldest cold snaps they've had in quite a while. Basically, all the way down, everyone was saying, "Oh, winter's come a month early to Sweden." It's like, oh, great, yeah, I kind of noticed. And then Denmark, it's not usually this cold here. Okay, well, I'm just going to have to get on with it. I did get a slightly heavier weight sleeping bag from Alpkit, and the think you guys have them on Backpacking Light website. The little Sol bivy bag, the really lightweight 130 gram one. That was my vapor barrier. So I'd whack that on, and then I'd get in my sleeping bag, and I had the warmest of nights ever in that combination. Then I hit Germany. Now, as soon as you hit Germany, Denmark isn't so bad because it does have a lot of empty land that you can wild camp on. As soon as I hit Germany, all that empty land seemed to have vanished, and it was just constantly populated. And you've got the issue of roads that you can't travel on that get in the way, and you're having to sort of navigate around them. But you don't always know you can't travel on the road, because it doesn't necessarily mean, if it's a B road. There was a section of a B road that I got a police escort off because I shouldn't have been on it, and I didn't have a clue. They actually drove behind me for about a mile while I ran in front because they couldn't fit my emergency pram that I'd got posted. Germany, that's where the sleeping or finding somewhere to sleep became interesting. I slept under a footbridge, disabled toilet. Where else did I sleep? Abandoned buildings. Anywhere I found that I could sleep, including pitching up my tent in a ditch next to one of their autobahns. I just slept. And the strange thing is that even though my sleep was broken, I'd kind of got used to it.
So just taking that as an example then, as you came into Germany, that feeling of open space suddenly changing to industrial space, did you go through the typical experiences that a wild camper goes through, having experienced wide open spaces, to suddenly feeling very, very out of place and somebody's going to be, waking you up and moving you on very quickly?
Kind of. I think because southern Sweden gets slightly more built up, and then Denmark gradually gets more built up. And Denmark, you're not really supposed to wild camp either. I kind of gradually was adapting what I was doing, and I knew I hit Germany, and when I have to really sort of think cleverly or be clever about where I'm sleeping. So a lot of the times I was pitching up when it was really dark. I'd pitch up places that were in shade, so basically there's no light hitting them, where people are generally walking with a light source, like a light on a bike, or they're carrying a torch, or there's cars driving past. And the thing with our eyesight is, and this is where my being a bit of a science geek kicked in, if you're walking along the path with a torch, you won't see what's in the ditch next to you, even if it's only a meter away, unless you turn the torch towards it. So I didn't actually get moved on ever. And I think it's because people just generally didn't find me.
Well, I suppose they weren't looking for you either.
Exactly. I mean, who on earth wild camps in the middle of winter? Yeah,
in a ditch in Germany. I mean, who would do that? Only a guy. It's not that guy I heard about who was ill, Clay, was it?
Yeah. The one with his backside in there.
Oh, it's him again.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was. I think the attitude of people started to change as well. I didn't really notice it as much in Germany, but as I got further south, so I'm going through Germany, a guy called Guido, who basically kind of became like part of a mini team that I had in the background that you could bounce ideas off, and it'd help with planning sections or finding information, and like basically just double checking that the information I found is what they found, so it matches up. He planned me a route from Flensburg at the top of Germany across where it was more populated, because nobody was really coming out or engaging with the run, because I was going through places that didn't have much population. So he took me across Germany. So I ran down, then across to Bonn and Cologne and all those sorts of places, which was amusing because people were like, oh, you need to visit this place and go have a look at this. And you don't really get to see any of that. You quite literally get from one end of the town to the other end as fast as you can, with maybe a shop break in the middle, and you wouldn't see anything, because the shortest route is round the outside, or it takes you under a canal path or something like that, so that you're not really in the main parts. And I smelt. I was wild camping day after day after day after day with nowhere really to wash. And washing myself seemed pointless because I can't wash my kit. So why would I wash if I'm going to put dirty clothes on afterwards? So I did end up avoiding people if I could, and sort of sitting off in a corner somewhere because I knew that I was going to be a bit smelly. But then, all credit to Guido for doing the route, because I did start meeting more people. I think I got more places to stay in Germany than I did in any of the other countries, based on the fact that it's just more populated. I had 2 German people on the same day try to give me €2 because they thought I was homeless. I kind of refused and tried to explain what I was doing. The first guy was called Wolfgang, and he explained his name to me, the fact that wolf is a powerful creature, and Gang comes from Genghis Khan, the powerful emperor. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure why he just told me that, but it is quite interesting. And then asked him why he tried to give me €2, and he just basically said, just so you have a better day, which would mean I can have a better day because I feel like I've helped. Like, okay, that's amazing, And then the next guy was just being kind again, but at the same time saying that Germans are just horrible people. No one is kind at all. And there's me stood there looking and going, do you realise 2 people have tried to give me money because they think I need it? You being one of them. And he sort of went, no, ciao, and just walked off. Just strange. But then from Wuppertal, I sat down at Guido's, because I needed a laptop really to properly plan my route. I needed to use a route that was reasonably easy to follow, didn't have too much up and down, because I decided to see what it would be like to run with a pram.
My thanks to Aleks once again for taking the time to chat with me from his current home, which, as you can hear, is an old taxi in a lay-by somewhere near Buxton. As you might understand, he's currently looking for a bit of work or to give some talks to interested groups. So if you know of a running club or a social group who would love some inspiration, do get in touch with him. And the details are over on the Outdoor Station website. In part 2, we find out how close he was on a daily basis to lethal danger, the impression of the world, people and humanity the trip has left with him, and the one serious question: do ultra runners wear no underwear? All these big topics and more next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for downloading this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.